So, what did you think? Let's rank this film on the Cageometer.
On to the most important question that we ask on this show. Vince, where does The Rock from 1996 rate on your Cageometer?
This is another one of Nick's movies that I love, mainly because I watched it a long time ago, and I still have that nostalgic feeling for it. But overall, as a movie, it's not that great of a movie. So I give it a 6 out of 10. I think it could have been a lot better if they would have trimmed it down, but they don't. And they let it run a little too long. As far as Nick's performance, I'll give him the same, 6. Wasn't great, but wasn't awful. I feel like it wasn't as cagey as some of his other Holy Trinity performances. But I don't think he really added anything to the film, but he didn't detract anything. So I think 6 out of 10 for both is pretty accurate.
Nigel, where does The Rock rate on your Cageometer?
Yeah, I had seen this one since it came out, or shortly after it came out, because I guess I would have been 9 when this movie came out, so I think I watched it around then. So I hadn't seen it since. The only part I remembered is the guy getting the ball in his mouth and then spitting it everywhere. That's like the only visual part of in my mind of it. But I really enjoyed it. I don't know about really enjoyed it, but I did enjoy it. It's my favorite of the trilogy of these actions that he did in the 96, 97.
Yeah.
It's definitely schlocky, but it's high budget, high quality schlock that I think a lot of those low budget schlock movies try to attain. But I think you had star power, you had a director who knows what he's doing with this type of shit, and you got a serviceable script, I guess, that's a good framework to let them do outlandish, outrageous crap, but like cool special effects. The action was good. It's an entertaining movie. It's definitely one of those movies you can throw on at any point and just have running in the background and look over every once in a while to see some cool shit happening on there. So I give it a 7 out of 10. Because it's entertaining enough. I would watch it again. I can see why this one is a classic. It's definitely a worthwhile Michael Bay movie. I know that not everybody here is a big fan of Michael Bay. I'm not myself, but this one's not too bad.
Yeah.
For what they tried to do, I think it's a good movie for it. It is a bit long. I feel like they could have trimmed out a decent amount of it and still kept all of the cool stuff that keeps it entertaining. It did seem to me, it did feel like it was dragging in some certain parts.
Okay.
And I think it was just because it was, there doesn't need to be that much going on in the film, but it's still pretty entertaining. Sean Connery steals the show. It's been a long time since I've seen a Sean Connery movie, so it was actually kind of nice to, I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed seeing him and stuff, so it was nice seeing that in there. I definitely look at it like a James Bond sequel. I think it makes the movie a lot nicer, or a lot better in that respect. So I definitely encourage people to think of it that way, especially if they're a fan of Bond. If not, it's its own thing. It stands alone. But I think it's weird that they originally were looking for Arnold Schwarzenegger to fill that role, because if you hadn't told me that, I would have felt that this was like 100% them just writing an unofficial James Bond sequel and tacking Nick Cage into it. So, it definitely feels like they went out of their way to make things as vague as possible so that you could fit it with it's weird. It's like a mix of vague and specific. Like, oh, he was trained by British Special Services or British Secret Service and MI6 or whatever, but they disavowed all knowledge of him. He was on a super secret mission.
Yeah. I feel like that might have been like once they found out that Connery was taking the role, maybe in some of the rewrites, they were like, oh.
Yeah. It definitely feels like it was an intentional nod to it once they got him on board with it. And he kind of, aside from swearing and being a lot more gritty, he kind of feels like he's still playing an old grizzled James Bond. But that's also, I think Connery just kind of played the same type of character in a lot of stuff.
In general, I think.
Like the reason why people consider him the best Bond is him. He brought that to Bond because that's how he acts. It's like Harrison Ford. You get Harrison Ford to do Harrison Ford stuff. He kind of elevates things because of who he is. Connery was the same way. But Cage, to his point, I give him like a 6 out of 10. I don't really. I kind of felt like he was kind of didn't elevate the movie as much as somebody like Sean Connery or even Ed Harris did in the role. I think it may have been because this was the first blockbuster kind of to pull him out of those indie films. So they didn't quite know how to use him properly, or he didn't quite know how to go about this character. Cause he's kind of going for more of that geeky, nerdy, likable guy, not an action hero. But he did a good enough job with it. It just felt like there wasn't a lot. You could have kind of swapped him out for somebody else in it, but it was a good platform for him to get out of those roles that he had been doing in the 80s and early 90s and kind of elevate him up to the point where he could become an action star. And, I think this is the movie that got people to see him in that light and obviously launched his career into the trajectory that it went on to.
I don't know that he was really like seeking that out. He just was offered the role and people were like, no, you can't do that role. And he was like, watch me, hold my beer. Here we go.
Right.
I'll do it
That's
for 20 years.
kind of cool that Sean Connery was the one that wanted to work with him or suggested or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that must have been pretty cool.
Yeah, that would
coming
be
from
like
a big film
such an
fan
awesome
like Cage.
thing for Cage. I'm sure it was just like, Sean Connery wanted to do the movie because of me? Which I'm guessing Sean Connery probably saw Leaving Las Vegas and, a few of those other 80s roles like Red Rock West and, Wild Heart. Everybody wanted to work with Cage there for a while. But he worked with like a lot of the big names.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't know. This one's it's one of his iconic films, but I don't think it's an iconic role for him. If that makes sense. It's just sort of he's just sort of in the movie. He's not really not compared to like something like Face Off, where it's like that movie is a platform for Cage and more Travolta in a lot of ways, but. Or even Con Air. Like he's more of a character in Con Air, but also less. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going with. Maybe you understand what I'm saying.
No.
Yeah. He at least like feels like more of a action character in Con Air than he does in this. He's more of just a guy, I guess.
A scientist,
Yeah.
It's helping out.
Yeah.
On my Cageometer, I also gave the movie a 7. This is by far and away, in my opinion, the best Michael Bay movie. There aren't many movies I consider from Michael Bay that are good. Basically like Bad Boys and this. The Island. I'm not a fan. I hate Michael Bay. So that's pretty high praise for me, giving him a 7. I felt like the movie, like I didn't feel like it really drug. I hadn't seen the movie in a while, but I had seen it within like the last 5 years or so, and it still was really enjoyable. Again, it's a movie that I'll definitely watch again, which is high marks, for a lot of the movies that we've done. There are a lot of movies that I will never, ever watch again. I will never watch Spirit of Vengeance ever again. Dying of the Light. Yeah. But yeah, overall, I mean, I felt like the pacing was pretty good. The antagonist was great. Ed Harris did a great job. I feel like his henchmen were a little, throwaway. His major guy, I can't remember his name, but that guy's been in a lot of things. He didn't really have much to do, but I feel like in the scenes that he had, he really kind of pulled you in.
His name was Baxter, I think
David
I wrote.
Morse, I think is his name, something like that. His
character's name was Major Baxter.
Okay.
I wrote it down because I was like, hey, it's that guy from everything.
Yeah, he's in tons of stuff. I felt like, the Womack Forsyth characters could have been interchangeable, but at the same time, I felt like they both did, Forsyth always is great when he shows up and things. And he also was kind of just a gruff guy, but you could tell he had a conscience, and whereas Womack seemed like a dick and didn't have a conscience, and of course Connery is, the reason that this movie holds up and the reason that people love this movie is not because of Nick Cage, it's because of Sean Connery. Mm-hmm. Cage is great as kind of the comic relief in the buddy comedy story here, but Sean Connery is just so freaking cool in everything that he does that he just steals the show. So I'll go over to Cage. I gave him a 6 as well because it didn't feel like he really brought a whole lot to the character, but his chemistry with Cage or with Connery was really great. I felt like they had a really nice back and forth, and I think maybe that's because of the mutual respect that they had for each other as actors.
Yeah.
And it makes me happy to see that Connery recognized Cage's like brilliance at that point, you know, because I feel like to somebody who's not an actor, Cage kind of can come off as a terrible actor. But I think to a really trained actor and a trained eye, they see the brilliance of what Cage is bringing to the roles and stuff. And I think he knew that he didn't have to bring too much. He just had to be the geeky guy who was able to defuse those bombs. And ultimately, he was the one who saved the day with the green flares, even though he probably shouldn't have been able to stand after shooting himself in the heart with something that was liquid based and not aerosol based. Anyway, there's a lot of like goofy things about this movie and a lot of things that detract from the quality. And it's like Nigel said, it's very schlocky, but it still holds up. I mean, it's a really fun movie.
Yeah.
And I think it's one that endures and will continue to endure.
Yeah. It's quotable. It's got good action.
Yeah.
You know,
and like you said, it's an iconic Nick Cage movie, but not an iconic Nick Cage role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a perfect summary, I think.
Yeah.